Stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, before you tell yourself that this is just another message, listen carefully. Because there is something about your life that you may have never fully understood. You have questioned certain things. You have questioned certain people. You have questioned certain doors that closed in front of you. And maybe, at some point, you even questioned yourself. You wondered why your journey had to be so different. Why did you have to experience things that others seemed to escape? Why did certain people leave? Why did some opportunities disappear at the exact moment you thought they were finally yours? Why did you sometimes feel like you were standing outside a world that everyone else seemed to understand? And perhaps the strangest part is this: you survived all of it. You are still here. But you may have been looking at your story from the wrong direction. You have been asking, why did this happen to me? But there is another question you need to ask. What was all of this preparing me to become? That question changes everything. Because sometimes the greatest mystery in your life is not what happened to you, it is who you were becoming while it was happening. And that is what this message is about. There is a version of you that has been hidden underneath years of disappointment, fear, rejection, confusion, and waiting. A version of you that you may not even recognize yet. And when you finally begin to understand that person, your past starts looking different. The rejection starts looking different. The delay starts looking different. The loneliness starts looking different. Even the moments when you thought God had forgotten you begin to carry a completely different meaning. You may have thought you were being pushed away, but perhaps you were being redirected. You may have thought you were losing people, but perhaps you were being separated from what could not follow you into your next chapter. You may have thought the delay meant something was wrong with you, but perhaps the delay was giving you time to become strong enough to carry what you were asking for. Think about that. What if the person you are today could not have existed without everything you survived yesterday? What if your scars are not proof that you were defeated? What if they are evidence that you endured? There is something powerful about a person who has been broken and still chooses to believe. Something powerful about someone who has cried in private but still showed up the next morning. Something powerful about someone who lost confidence, lost relationships, lost opportunities, and sometimes even lost direction, but never completely lost the desire to keep going. Maybe you have been measuring your life by what you lost. God may be looking at what you gained. Wisdom, discernment, patience, strength, compassion, awareness, and most importantly, identity. Because there comes a moment when you stop asking the world to tell you who you are. You stop needing everyone to approve of you. You stop chasing people who do not recognize your value. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided to misunderstand you. And you begin to realize something. You were never supposed to become a copy of everyone around you. Your journey was always going to look different. Your timing was always going to look different. And your purpose may require a level of preparation that other people simply cannot see. This is why comparison can become so dangerous. You look at somebody else's life and think, they are ahead. They have more. They found their person. They found success. They seem happy. But you don't know what their journey requires, and they don't know what yours requires. Your chapter cannot be measured against somebody else's chapter. You may be in a preparation season while someone else is in a harvest season. That does not mean you were forgotten. It means your story is still unfolding. And perhaps the greatest mistake you have made is assuming that the current chapter is the final chapter. It isn't. You are still becoming. But here is where things get interesting. There may have been signs throughout your life that you were being pushed toward a deeper understanding of yourself. You may have always felt different. You may have been unusually sensitive to people's intentions. You may have noticed things that others ignored. You may have needed more solitude than other people understood. You may have walked away from certain environments without even knowing exactly why. You may have experienced moments where something inside you said, "Don't go there. Don't trust this. Wait, be patient." And later, you understood why. That inner awareness may have protected you more times than you realize. But don't misunderstand this. Being different does not mean you are better than everyone else. Being chosen does not mean you are entitled to everything you want. It means you have a responsibility to become the person you were created to become. And that requires humility. It requires discipline. It requires growth. It requires learning how to distinguish between what you want and what is actually good for you. Because sometimes your greatest blessing does not arrive looking like a blessing. Sometimes it arrives as a closed door. Sometimes it arrives as a goodbye. Sometimes it arrives as a season where nothing seems to move. And sometimes it arrives as silence. That silence can be terrifying. You pray, you wait, you ask for an answer, and nothing seems to happen. But silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence is where your perspective changes. Sometimes the answer begins inside you before it ever appears around you. You begin seeing people differently. You begin seeing yourself differently. You begin recognizing patterns. You begin understanding why certain relationships could never survive your growth. You begin realizing that some things you begged for would have destroyed the peace you now value. And suddenly, your past begins connecting. One moment connects to another. One disappointment explains another. One closed door leads toward another opportunity. One painful lesson gives you the wisdom you needed for something you haven't even reached yet. This is when your life starts making sense. Not because every painful event suddenly becomes pleasant, but because you finally understand that your story was bigger than the individual moments. And perhaps right now, you are standing at the beginning of that realization. You are not discovering a completely different person. You are discovering the person that has been there all along, the person underneath the fear, underneath the insecurity, underneath the need for approval, underneath the version of yourself you created just to survive. And when that person begins to emerge, you will stop asking, "Why am I different?" And you will start asking, "How am I supposed to use what I've been through?" That is a much more powerful question, because your past cannot be changed, but its meaning can change. The pain cannot always be erased, but what you build from it can become extraordinary. The tears cannot always be taken back, but they can become part of the wisdom you carry, and the person who once wondered whether they would survive can become the person who helps someone else believe they can survive too. So if you have been feeling like your life is a collection of disconnected events, stay with this message, because we are about to go deeper. There is a reason the realization of your identity can change the way you see your entire past. And there is one mistake that many people make when they begin discovering who they really are. They think their identity is about a title, a status, a label, a special position. It isn't. Your true identity is revealed by what you become when nobody is watching, by what you choose when nobody is applauding, by what you refuse to become even after life gives you every reason to become bitter. And that is where the real transformation begins. End of part 1. There is a difference between knowing your name and knowing who you are. Most people spend their entire lives trying to answer the first question through the eyes of other people. Am I successful enough? Am I attractive enough? Am I respected enough? Am I important enough? Do people like me? Do people approve of me? But none of those questions can give you a permanent identity. Because people's opinions change, circumstances change, money changes, relationships change, even your own emotions change. So if your identity is built on things that can disappear, you will always feel unstable. But something changes when you realize that your worth was never supposed to depend entirely on external validation. You begin standing differently, thinking differently, choosing differently, You don't need to convince everyone anymore, and this is where many people will misunderstand your transformation. They may say, "You have changed," and they will be right. You have changed, but not necessarily into someone colder. You may simply be becoming more honest, more disciplined, more peaceful, more selective with your energy, more protective of your purpose. There is a point in your life where peace becomes more valuable than attention, where truth becomes more valuable than approval, where purpose becomes more valuable than popularity. And when you reach that point, some relationships will naturally change, not because you hate anyone, but because you finally understand that not everyone is supposed to have unlimited access to you. Some people were part of a chapter. That does not mean they belong in every chapter, and this can be painful, because sometimes you still love people you can no longer walk with. Sometimes you can forgive someone without allowing them back into the same position. Sometimes you can wish someone well without returning to the environment that hurt you. That is maturity. And perhaps you have been learning this lesson for years. Every disappointment taught you discernment. Every betrayal taught you boundaries. Every delay taught you patience. Every failure taught you humility. Every lonely season taught you how to stand without applause. And every time you thought you were finished, you discovered another level of strength. This is why your story may make more sense later than it does today. You cannot always understand a puzzle while holding only one piece. You need the entire picture, and your life is still being assembled. There are pieces you haven't seen yet. There are connections you haven't recognized yet. There are doors you haven't reached yet. And there are versions of yourself you haven't met yet. So don't judge your entire destiny from one difficult season. Don't declare your entire future based on one disappointment. Don't call yourself a failure because something didn't work. Sometimes no is simply a direction you don't understand yet. And sometimes what feels like being rejected is actually being protected. Imagine asking for something with your whole heart and getting nothing. Months pass, maybe years. You start wondering whether your prayers matter. Then one day you encounter the thing you once desperately wanted. And suddenly you understand why it had to wait. Because you are different now. You can handle it differently now. You can see what you couldn't see before. You can recognize what you once ignored. This is the hidden blessing of preparation. Preparation often feels like delay because there is nothing obvious to celebrate. But something is happening beneath the surface. Roots grow in darkness. Strength develops in silence. Character develops when nobody is watching. And sometimes the most important season of your life will look completely ordinary while you are living through it. You will wake up, work, pray, learn, fall, get back up, repeat. Nothing dramatic. But inside, you are becoming someone new. Then one day, an opportunity arrives. A conversation happens, a door opens, a person enters your life, a decision appears, and suddenly, you realize, I've been preparing for this without even knowing it. That is the moment when your past starts making sense. You see why you had to learn patience, why you had to develop courage, why you had to stop chasing certain people, why you had to become independent, why you had to rebuild your confidence, why you had to learn to trust your judgment. The pieces begin connecting, and you realize something profound. Your life wasn't necessarily delayed. You were being developed. There is a difference. But I want you to be careful here. Don't turn the idea of being chosen into an excuse to sit and wait for miracles. Your purpose requires participation. Faith does not mean refusing to act. Hope does not mean ignoring reality. And destiny does not remove responsibility. If you believe you were created for something meaningful, then prepare for it. Develop your character. Improve your skills. Take care of your responsibilities. Learn from your mistakes. Treat people with dignity. Keep your word. And when an opportunity arrives, be ready. Because sometimes people ask for a door to open while spending years refusing to build the person who can walk through it. Don't be that person. Become ready. Become disciplined. become trustworthy, become emotionally mature, become someone who can carry success without losing themselves. Because the real question is not simply, what are you going to receive? The deeper question is, who will you be when you receive it? That is where identity becomes powerful. Your identity is not merely what you claim. It is what your choices repeatedly prove. If you say you value peace, do your decisions create peace? If you say you value your purpose, does your daily life reflect it? If you say you trust God, can you keep moving when you don't have every answer? These questions reveal more than any label ever could. And perhaps this is why your journey has been uncomfortable. You were not being asked merely to receive something. You were being asked to become someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who doesn't collapse every time life says no. Someone who doesn't abandon their values just because they're lonely. Someone who doesn't trade their future for temporary validation. Someone who understands that being different is not a curse. It can be a responsibility. And now we are getting closer to the deepest part of this message. Because once you begin discovering who you are, you start realizing that some of the things you thought were random were actually turning points. And one of those turning points may have happened during the moment you felt most forgotten. The moment you thought nothing was happening may have been the moment everything began changing. End of part 2.